Hi everyone. Okay, I'm still sick, as you can hear and probably see. Um, so I I totally thought that I had COVID, and I had all the symptoms, and I went and got tested, and it's negative. So I think a few of you were wondering. Um, I was surprised. I thought for sure I had it. I had all of the symptoms, like I said. I'm doing much better today, but I was really sick. Like, I mean, the whole thing. Um, Fever, body aches, chills, cough. Like, oh my God, coughing. My chest was hurting. Um, and of course, of course, this had to coincide. My mom was visiting last week. We've been planning this for a while. Like, I haven't seen her for a little over a year, so she flew out from North Carolina to visit. And of course, like the day before she gets here, I start to feel like I got like a head cold, and she's like, "Oh, I'm sure you'll be fine." Luckily, we still had plenty of like bonding time, so that was cool. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, but I went and got tested at the school at UNLV. Um, and I thought for sure it was going to come back positive, but it didn't, so that's good. I'm pretty sure it's just because like last year and the year before I had a really bad case of bronchitis, so I'm assuming it's probably just that again, and I'm already feeling a lot better today. But it's been, what's today? Friday. I've been sick since last Tuesday. Yeah, so it's been like 10 days. Um, Finally feeling like more functional the last like 2 days or so, but obviously like if I have to sit here and film for 30 minutes or 40 minutes, I'm probably gonna end up like I've got this, so I'm probably gonna have to like sneeze or cough or blow my nose or something. But okay. Okay, so now that I've updated you on my life here, this is the lecture on sexuality, sex, and gender. So in the syllabus, so I know I mentioned this like pretty much like every video with you guys, that I kind of designed the syllabus. So like, oh my gosh, okay, a million thoughts in my head right now. Okay, so the first thing is, I know that every professor who teaches an online class, whether like now or in the past, like they all kind of have their own way of doing it. And that's fine, I've taken online courses, and each time the professor does it differently. There's so much information, it's overwhelming. Some it's just a few things, you don't even really know what you're doing. And so I tried to give you guys, like I said, with the syllabus, give you guys as much information as possible, and then still, of course, have a lot of information on Canvas as well. And then, of course, with my, the written announcements and updates, the stuff I say in the videos to update you, reminding you of upcoming assignments. And then, of course, like the other videos I posted where we're discussing some of the assignments in more detail. So I've tried to, make this online class user-friendly as best I can. And anyway, so like the point of that, what I was going to say is that with that being said, when I went over how I was going to structure, Canvas and the class and everything, I know some other professors have where you have like their syllabus isn't even set up like day by day or week by week. It's really set up in like sections, like, okay, from the beginning of the semester to like October 15th, you have to turn in, these 10 assignments, and then as long as it's due by that due date, which like works for some people totally. But I structured mine, as you obviously have been able to see throughout the semester, I structured mine more like as if we were in class. And I figured this is probably best for you because it gives you, the students who, some of you this may be your first semester or first year in college, it gives you a little bit more to work with in terms of organization, that I'm not just giving you a bunch of stuff and saying, okay, here's this due date in the future, get all this stuff done. If I, space it out the way we would have in normally, like if we were meeting in class, like some stuff would be due one day, we'd be talking about something else another day. If it was more structured like that, it would be easier for you all to, follow, to keep up on assignments, to not procrastinate. And it seems as if, for the most part, that's what you guys have been doing. You've been doing it really well. Okay, so all of that is also to say that with this particular topic, sexuality, sex, and gender, in the syllabus, you'll notice that this covers 3 days. because in class, normally we spend a lot of time talking about this. Like when I'm doing this class in person, there's a lot of back and forth discussion. A lot of people have personal stories. And so for those of you who have already started the discussion prompt that's due, I think it's due like in 3 days, I think. So like I'm recording this on Friday. You're probably not watching it till Monday, so the dates are different. You guys can look at the due dates on the syllabus. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so the last discussion prompt gets at some of the stuff that normally would come up in an in-class, setting with some of the topics we're going to be talking about on this PowerPoint. So what I'm going to do is, so anyway, on the syllabus, like I said, it's sectioned into 3 different days, because typically when we're in class, I spend at least 3 days, if not more, going over just this one PowerPoint, because so many people have opinions or questions or comments. And because of course everyone wants to talk about sex and gender. Everyone has an opinion about sex and gender, versus when we're talking about like agriculture, there's not a lot of opinion about that. So like obviously it's a more lively discussion, and we don't really get to have that. I'm hoping that I can take what you guys have written in the discussion prompt. I'm going to pull that into the next video. So anyway, not to like lose track of the main thing I was trying to say this whole time, is that even though in the syllabus I have it as 3 days, because in my mind I thought, well, I'll make 3 videos, it might not be 3. I was kind of skimming, and I'm thinking, okay, there's a lot of pictures. I don't have that, in-class interaction with you. I'm going to anticipate and try to remember some of the questions that students have brought up in the past. And then, of course, on the next video, I'll be able to pull in some of the stuff you guys talked about in the discussion prompt. But it might not be parts 1, 2, and 3. It might just be parts 1 and 2. I guess we'll kind of see as we go. I try not to make these videos super long, even though technically in class I'd have you for like an hour and 15 minutes. I try not to let these go longer than like 45. I think maybe 1 or 2 have gone a little longer than that. So if we get to, if it just naturally seems as if, because I'm just talking and talking like I always do. If it seems like we'll have 3, then we'll have 3. And if it seems like it might just be 2, I'd be 2. So anyway, so the point of me telling you this is if in the end of this I made just 2 videos, don't think like, where's the 3rd one, or, Okay, so I wasted, not wasted, for 7 minutes I talked about all of that. Now we can actually get into the actual topic. I'm trying to think if there's anything else, any like housekeeping stuff. I don't think so. Hopefully you guys are you watched those 2 videos I posted about the ethnography. I had a handful of questions from students about that, clarification on stuff. So great that you guys are, getting, not waiting to the last minute. I think I want to say from the day I'm recording this on the 13th. So you have like a little less than 2 weeks. So depending on when you're watching this, you might have less time. But like I said, even if you are watching this video on Monday, the 16th, and you're like, oh my God, I totally forgot about this whole ethnography assignment, you still have plenty of time. So don't stress about that. Try not to cough. I don't want to start coughing. I'll just be coughing for like 10 minutes straight. Okay. Last night, my boyfriend, he was like, I forget what he said. I was laughing, and when you're sick and you're laughing and then you start coughing, and I was just like coughing and coughing. He's like, oh my God, are you okay? I was like, don't make me laugh. Don't make me laugh. I'm going to just kind of cough, cough, cough. Okay. Okay, so let's get started on this PowerPoint. Okay, so slide 2. You've seen this before. Sex and gender are not the same thing. I want to make sure that, honestly, if you take 3 things away from this whole class this semester, this is, obviously evolution is really important, the cultural stuff, but as a side note, this is so important. Sex and gender are not the same thing. And this is the PowerPoint. This is the lecture where we're really going to get into some of these differences. So like I said, I'm pretty sure we've talked about this exact thing before when we talked about sexual dimorphism. We're going to talk about that again, but just to reiterate this, and we're going to go over this in a little more detail. So sex is a binary, male or female. This is based on, anatomy, morphology, physiology, a number of things. There are 2 categories, male, female. Obviously we know, because this is how nature works in everything. We got a snotty girl. We're all sick here. You okay? Ooh. You see, she's right there. She's snotty. Okay. Oh, I was gonna say, like, and of course, this because nature is never 100% on anything. That's not how nature works at all for anything. That there will often be exceptions. Exceptions prove the rule. So you might have an individual who might have, an extra X chromosome, or like some kind of other like medical anomaly. But that doesn't mean that the binary doesn't exist. Those are just exceptions to the rule. So just statistical outliers. However, so I think, like I said, I think let me just skim through this real quick. Okay, I'm pretty sure in the other PowerPoint, what was it on? Am I remembering wrong that we talked about this a little bit before, or was it my other class? Okay, I don't want to assume we did and then not talk about it. So if I'm repeating myself, I guess that's better than assuming we talked about it and I didn't. Okay, so just like I said, as to reiterate, because I don't see it in this PowerPoint, but those differences between male and female, obviously we talked about, or I'm thinking we did, but I'll say it again. Primary and secondary sex characteristics. So obviously, like genitalia is different for males versus females. Those are the primary sex characteristics, but secondary, so those things that happen during puberty. So like for females, breasts, hips widen, body hair for males and females in different similar locations, but sometimes more or less depending on if you're male or female. All of the different hormonal changes that occur, menstruation for females. So like the list goes on and on, right? Clearly 2 categories for that. However, when we're talking about gender, this is something very different. And unfortunately, we use these 2 terms interchangeably all the time. I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys or this is my other class. I know I say that all the time. I say that to them too. Like, did I say it to you or them? When I was first diagnosed with cancer and I was going through, doctor's appointments after doctor's appointments, I had to fill out like, oh my God, like not thousands, but a lot of forms. And it was a lot of the same information, like my personal information, my name, address, blah, 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 insurance information. But on all the forms, they ask, male or female, or on almost all of them. And some, for the most part, they would say sex and you check, M or F. But some would say gender, and I would always cross it out. It bugs me. I would just cross it out and I'd write sex, because when I'm at, whether it's, the surgeon or my oncologist, they don't care like about how I view myself socially or the rules I feel are being imposed on me by society. They want to know what body parts I have. They want to know sex. They don't want to know gender. But we use those 2 things interchangeably all the time. They're not the same thing. I think we do that because I think linguistically, and because I think just our puritanical history in this country, we don't want to say the word sex, whether we mean intercourse or we're just talking about male versus female. So gender is a softer word, but we end up conflating the 2, and they're very, very separate things. And in fact, and we'll talk about this in a second, gender itself, you can refer to that in meaning different things as well. So just know that they're not the same thing. And I caught this on a couple of your essay exams. A few of you had mentioned sexual dimorphism, about to discuss a few things, and use the word gender instead of sex, and not the same thing. So just to make that clear. Okay, so then we understand what sex is, and if you're taking the 102 class with me, we get into that a lot more, the sex differences. But sorry, I keep huffing, I'm just trying to catch my breath. Okay. Gender. So a lot of different ways to kind of understand gender. Is it how... Oh, this dry mouth's going to kill me this whole time. I've only been talking for 15 minutes. Okay. Okay. Is gender the how you express yourself? Is it how you express yourself in your given society? Is it how you view yourself in social scenarios, or how you want others to view you? I think a lot of people would understand it that way, but also there's this whole other way of understanding gender, of it is actually an oppressive system. It is the rules that are imposed on us based on which sex we're born. So those are 2, even within just talking about gender, there are kind of 2 different ways of understanding it. Is it part of your personal expression, or is it actually in practice, these rules that are imposed on you, whether you're male or female. So, for example, this idea that because I'm a female, I should be a mother, or that because I'm a female, I shouldn't get a college degree, or that I should know how to cook, or I'm good with, I already said mothers, but I'm good, even that I'm good with babies, or I'm no, I have no idea. I have no idea what to do, nor do I want to know. And for men too, the rules or expectations, that you should be physically very, very strong, or that you should be successful financially. The list goes on and on. We could have a whole discussion about just that exact topic. What are the expectations put on you because you're a male in this society? What are the expectations put on you because you're a female in this society? So we could, have a discussion for I could have a whole lecture just on that one question, So think about that. I think I hear a lot of people talking about gender, more recently, and I'm a lot older than you guys. So I see these different conversations about sexism and gender and feminism really shifting in the last couple of decades. I would say some good, some bad. I mean, that's true for anything, right? Different generations will view things differently. And so that's just how it is. And we see that progression, culturally, socially. So I think some of it's positive, some of it's negative, but that's just the way the world is, There was a point to that. Gender. Oh yeah. So like I said, having these two, even within gender, having these two different ideas of, like I said, whether it's how you express yourself, and this is the way I think I've heard it used more recently. This idea of gender identity, gender expression, and so I feel when a lot of people talk about gender now, that's the narrative they have, versus when I talk about it, especially in terms of how I've understood it, being a little older than you guys generationally, but also academically. How we discuss this topic of gender, it's a little bit different. It's more about like I said, these expectations that are put on you because you're a male or a female. No surprise, the expectations or responsibilities tend to have more dire consequences for females, and I think later in this PowerPoint we get into that. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We get into that a little bit more. So the point of this, we're still on slide 2. So just like I said, just understand that sex and gender are not the same thing, but even within gender, how we understand that concept can be different. So if you're having a discussion with someone about gender, kind of make that distinction. Okay, are we talking about just kind of gendered expression, or are we talking about these expectations and rules that are imposed upon us? That often for most people, they would say we want to reject, so. Okay, slide 3. So this is just a review of sexual dimorphism. Oh, of course. I'm just kind of skimming. I already see something. I was I didn't put that in here, and I see it right there. Okay. Okay, so slide 3, just a review of sexual dimorphism, just to kind of reiterate these differences between males and females. This is true for humans. Sexual dimorphism, the differences between male and female of the same species based on either size, shape, or color. For humans, we have, clear differences. And if you go to slide 4, I was I didn't put this, and it's right there. So of course, this is me with my sick brain right now. Okay, so you can just see, I just give you guys a list of some of these biological and or evolutionary differences between males and females. So of course, the difference between those who gestate, in terms of reproduction, those who gestate versus those who inseminate, very different reproductive roles. Reproductive organs are very, very different. Sexual organs, so reproductive organs and sexual organs, not always the same thing, quite different. Of course, females experience menstruation and males do not. There's also the difference in those other, like I said, those secondary sex characteristics, those things that happen at puberty, changes in the bone structure, fatty tissue that are clearly different between males and females, and of course the different types of hormones that will increase depending on whether you're a male or a female. And that's kind of it. So none of this is unfamiliar to you, just kind of reiterating this with a few examples. So, okay, that's going to come up again. Okay, so now if we were in class, this next part would be so fun. but we're not. Okay. We can try to have fun with me talking to myself essentially right now. I try to imagine that you guys are like, that it's a live lecture and you guys are there, even though I'm like, there's no one there. I think I told you guys one time, I don't know if it was for this class or my other class, but I was like talking, recording a lecture for like 10 minutes, and I realized it wasn't recording. So not only do I always feel like I'm talking to myself anyway, because I'm just talking to the camera, but that time I actually was just talking to myself. I wasn't even recording. Okay. Okay, so slide 5. Okay. There, on slide 5, there is a picture with 3 females. And on those 3 females, essentially it's the same. There's one difference in, like, if you went like 1, 2, 3. That's pretty much the same female, but there's kind of one physical difference between the 3. You might be able to notice it right away, but don't worry about that just yet. What I want to know is, so typically if we were in class, I would say, okay, heterosexual males answer the question. But of course, everyone can answer just because it's just for fun. So you right now, as you're watching this, like, look at this picture on slide 5, and which one do you think is the most attractive? Now, don't say what do you think is like the socially acceptable answer. Don't try to be like, I'm gonna be different and answer that. Like, just honest opinion. Which one do you find more attractive? Would it be 1, 2, or 3? And look at them for a second. 1, 2, or 3. Okay. Most people say 1. Now, I'm gonna get into that in a second, but go now to the next slide, slide 6. Now you'll notice again, there are 3, it's a picture of 3 females. Now it's really similar to the previous slide, right? But it's a little different. But once again, we have 3 individuals, 1, 2, 3. Now, once again, without trying to like guess what everyone else is guessing or trying to be like, I'm gonna be cool and answer the different thing. Just honest answer. Which one do you find more attractive? 1, 2, or 3? The majority of people, heterosexual males, will say number 1. So if you're going back and forth between slide 5 and 6, you'll notice basically the difference is there are a couple things going on here. Like, why do the majority, like statistically significant, why do the majority of heterosexual males find, whether it's slide 5 or slide 6, why do they find that first female to be more attractive than like 1 and 2? Now, if you're looking at the series of pictures on slide 5, you'll notice that the woman is a little more slender, even across all 3 of those pictures. She's a little more slender. And then in slide 6, she's definitely a little like curvier, right? But even amongst those 3, whether you're on slide 5 or slide 6, there is a clear difference between that first individual, going across. What I hope you notice, and since I've been talking, we've been looking at these pictures for the last like 3 minutes, hopefully you have already picked up that there's something going on with what we call waist to hip ratio. So if you look at slide 5 or slide 6, and you'll see that first individual has a more defined waistline. Whether she's like on slide 5, whether she's a little more slender, all 3 of them are, or whether she's not. If that waist is defined, that is considered an attractive trait. So recall that we talked about before non-random mating or sexual selection, that those things may not be at the forefront of our minds. Like, heterosexual males aren't thinking these evolutionary things about like, as my brain's not working, waist to hip ratio, birth canal width, fat distribution. Like, none of those things are at the forefront of their mind, but hold on, sorry guys, okay. But these are absolutely going on, like, subconsciously in some way. So if you're looking at, like I said, if you're looking at that first individual, the waist to hip ratio, so that the waist, is clearly defined in terms of like it's in contrast to the hips. So there are a couple things going on. One is that for a female to be able to, give birth, the hips need to be widened. Which is why that's something that happens at puberty for females. Now, not every female has the same, of course, like width of her hips. But in general, males compared to females compared, oh my God. You guys know what I mean. Females compared to males, our hips are we obviously have hips. Now, if you ask a heterosexual male, like, about hips, he might just think like, oh, I want to like touch them, or I like to hold my beautiful girlfriend and hold her hips or something, but there's something, there's a lot more going on, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking this already, like, oh, okay, like childbirth, and like obviously you want your genes to like you want to oh my god, my brain, you want to produce healthy offspring, and that means that they have to be birthed, and that it's going to require someone who has the hip size that's going to be able to birth. Like humans have really big heads, like our babies have really big heads, right? So this one makes sense, but then you might be thinking, okay, like wider hips makes sense, but what about the the waist part? So there's a couple things going on. One is that for the hips also, it's not necessarily just the bone structure, but it's also the fat. Females who are watching us, hear me please on this. You are supposed to have fat there. You are supposed to have fat on your, like evolutionarily speaking, on your lower abdomen, and like your hips area. You are supposed to have fat there. That is natural. I see some women like, I need to lose this little belly. I need to like tone. Like obviously being healthy and toned is like obviously a positive thing. But I see so many females, I think are what's the word? Have a negative view of themselves in that, like in their natural female form. And you were supposed to, like evolutionarily, you were supposed to have fat there. This is because in the event that you become pregnant, there has to be an extra storage, like of caloric resources for anything that you're gestating. Which is why, if you've ever heard of this thing called amenorrhea, it's when a female has, like, she's already started her period. Let's say she's like 18. She got her period when she was 13 or something. If she suddenly has a drastic decrease in body fat, like if she's like an athlete or a dancer, or has an eating disorder, if there's a sudden decrease in body fat, she'll actually stop getting her period. The body basically says, whoa, you don't even have enough body fat on you to support you, let alone any offspring you might be gestating soon. So we're just going to stop this whole menstruation process until the body fat increases, and then she gets her period again. So the body, like evolutionarily, already has all these different ways of dealing with this. There was a whole point. Oh yeah, so you're supposed to have fat there, and that's like a signal. That's a signal to your body. I am ready for the possibility that I might be gestating, offspring soon, and then it signals something to the heterosexual male. She is now reproductively at the age of reproduction. But then also with the fat, having too much body fat can be, isn't always healthy. And so this is also a signal to a potential mate. I have just enough fat in the right locations. My hips are wide, not too much fat to be unhealthy, because you don't want to mate with someone who's not healthy. So hopefully this is all making sense. There's a lot, like I said, there's a lot going on, and most heterosexual males are not thinking any of this in the forefront of their mind when they see a beautiful curvy woman. Like on slide 5, whether she's curvy and a size 8, or on slide 6, whether she's curvy and a size 14. So it's just about that waist to hip ratio. Is there a defined waist to a degree? And that's going to be considered a trait, an attractive trait. Okay, slide 7. I was like, I'll get through these fast. I'm at like 30 minutes and we're on slide 7. I don't even know why I tell you guys that. I'm like, yeah, we'll go fast. I never do. I always just ramble, right? Okay. Sorry. Slide 7. Okay. So now this would be like a question to the heterosexual female. So look at this picture, this series of 5 faces. It is the same person. One thing has changed. It should be very obvious to you what's changed, right? It's the facial hair, but it's the same person. Now count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and take a minute. And obviously, anyone watching this, you can do the same thing. It doesn't have to be the heterosexual females, but these are the ones who have been asked this in multiple studies, just like with the previous one with heterosexual males. Okay, so you're looking at this photo, 5 pictures. Which one do you find the most attractive? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would say 4. And this is the answer. Most heterosexual females say 3 and 4. So there's a few things going on with this as well. Now you might be thinking, and obviously like with this, there are some like cultural implications, like beards might be really popular for certain generations or not. So that's like a thing. But there's a lot of evolutionarily like going on as well. So when you're looking at that and knowing that's the same person, the only difference is the facial hair, but like this person looks different, right? Hopefully you're picking up on that. He looks very young in the first photo, and he looks so much older in the second, into the last one, kind of like, it almost looks like an age progression, but it's not. It's just the facial hair that has changed. So what is that? What might that signal to a heterosexual female? He has knowledge and wisdom, possibly, by being a little bit older? Absolutely. And also think about these things in terms of like, not necessarily like 2020, but imagine as this evolutionary process is going on for hundreds of thousands of years in the past without modern medicine. So like that's the other thing about having the wider hips for birthing. Like now, if you're a more, slender hipped female and you get pregnant, you can go to the doctor, they'll probably schedule a C-section. But in the past, you just would have died. So like it's a completely different scenario. So also kind of have that in your mind. So for the females, having a partner who is knowledgeable and has wisdom about, which areas in their region are best for finding water or for hunting or whatever it is, any male or female, honestly, like having a partner who's knowledgeable about like the world and stuff, that's always going to be a positive. So typically we assume that as someone gets a little older, they tend to have more of that. So like that's definitely something that might be, indicated by that facial hair. That person's probably older. Maybe they're a little bit older, wiser, But then you might be thinking, okay, if that's true, why wouldn't most women be picking the very last one? Because there's kind of a balance of a few things going on. Normally in class, I would say, what causes like hair growth? And someone would say testosterone. Yes, that's correct. What do we know about too much testosterone? Often leads to certain behavioral changes, things like aggression. So it's finding that balance between someone who is knowledgeable and wise, not too much testosterone, we don't want them to be aggressive. So it's kind of finding that right balance, right? So that's why 3 and 4 is like the perfect balance. And also there's been some research onto this about looking at like parasites and like in hair and body hair, and that you don't want to have too many, but sometimes if some can be beneficial, like that's interesting. Okay, you guys get the idea. A lot of this is like a balance between this thing and that thing, and then what's attractive in this way, what's attractive in this way, and health and reproduction, and like there's all these different things going on, right? Whether you are a heterosexual male or heterosexual female. Also, that's the other thing I want to say, is that obviously when we're talking about evolution, the evolutionary and reproductive process, obviously we're talking about, because humans are a sexually reproducing species, male and female, that's how we reproduce, that a lot of the discussions are going to be focused on heterosexuality. But obviously as we get into more of these cultural discussions, we'll be talking about all the other types of sexual orientation. But like obviously I'm hoping that makes sense to you, why like at least evolutionarily why it's obviously focused on in terms of reproduction, why it's focused on heterosexuality. However, evolutionarily we're starting to understand, I think there's some really interesting research coming out recently about understanding homosexuality, even in terms of evolution, so that's really cool in humans. Okay, so slide, let's see where we at, 33. We'll go a little bit longer on this one. See, I was like, I might just do 2. This is probably gonna end up being 3 videos, I just know it. See, like I don't need you guys, I just like talk to myself. Okay, so slide 8. So 3 pictures. Hopefully you realize that's Scarlett Johansson, but you might be thinking it's Scarlett Johansson, but they all kind of look different. What's going on? So the last photo is the picture of her. If I'm remembering this correctly, why does that look weird? Wait. The first photo give me a second, guys. Okay. Oh man. I think it's the first one is the picture of her, and the other 2 are like her right side of her face mirror image and the left side of her face mirror image. So basically, like, this is the point. no one's face is perfectly symmetrical. Your left and your right, hold on, so I'm getting these email alerts and I'm just driving me crazy. Okay. Your left side of your face and your right side of your face are not perfectly the same. Like, and now you're gonna be obsessed by looking in the mirror, like, oh my god, my face, like, it looks different, right? And like, I'm on, like, my eyebrows, like, I mean, well, you guys know this. I talked about this. Like, I lost, all my hair during chemo, and my hair grew back very thick and pretty much the same as it was before. But my eyelashes almost didn't come back. They took like 6 months before I had eyelashes again, and my eyebrows never really came back. Like, this eyebrow came back 60%. This one came back like 20%. It just never came back. So I draw them on, which is like not a big deal. I used to kind of fill them in anyway, but I'm always trying to get them perfect, and it's just like impossible, right? Because I'm like, oh, they look perfect. And then I see myself like from this side or this side. I'm like, how is this one like way the fuck up here? It drives me crazy. I'll spend like 30 minutes just doing my eyebrows. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't even care. No one's going to notice. No one's going to like be nitpicking at my face the way I do my own face. But then, I'm sure the most of the women know what I'm talking about. Probably even some of the men. Like, and now look at your face in the mirror, like, oh yeah. And this is totally normal. Like, no one's face is perfectly symmetrical. Everyone's face has a little bit, like, one eyebrow is going to be a little higher, one ear's maybe a little lower. Maybe one of your eyes slants slightly differently. And then of course all the other little things, freckles and stuff. But your face structure is not perfect on the left and the right. However, we do know that the more symmetrical, the more close the left and the right side are, this typically is indicative of like general health. And so you might not be thinking about that when you see someone, but like, oh, that person's really attractive. They probably have more of an asymmetrical face. You're not probably like seeing that like in the forefront of your mind. You're not thinking that, but that's absolutely true. And then of course, if someone's face is very asymmetrical, then you're going to notice it. It's typically not considered an attractive trait in someone, Now we might be thinking, oh, well, it looks weird. But in reality, it's probably indicative of a lot of other things going on, like health-wise, which as a potential mate could be really important information to you. So like I said, evolutionarily, reproductively, there's always other stuff going on in your mind. So this is to show for Scarlett Johansson that typically what we see when we see a more symmetrical face, it tends to be more attractive. But obviously, like I said, no one's face is 100% attractive. Don't email me, teacher. I was staring at my face in the mirror, trying to figure out. Oh man, our new obsession. Okay, what are we at? 37. We'll go a little bit longer. Okay, slide 9. Okay. So, some important questions to consider. And if we were in class, I would tell everyone, okay, take 5 minutes, get into a little group, talk about it. We have usually a really great class discussion about this. And it's always good because we have people kind of agreeing on stuff, disagreeing on other things, which is always really important in a science class. It's always important in academia. Never be afraid to have a different opinion, but always obviously being respectful of other people's opinions on a lot of this. But it's always really good to have that back and forth dialogue and to learn a lot and to see everyone's perspective. It's really cool. We don't get to have that. Like I said, with some of these questions I have a lot of these like interesting points to consider, important questions. Some of these I address in that discussion prompt, and when I checked today before I started this, and I saw like only a few of you had started it, which is fine. It's not due for a couple days. So hopefully once you guys do all that on the next video for this for sex and gender, I'll bring in some of that info. So I'm hoping that'll be like, you guys, I already saw the few things that I saw posted were like really poignant. So I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are really, it's a really good topic. Okay, anyway. Okay, but here are some more just kind of important points to consider, and I'll just kind of talk about them. So the first one, if there are only 2 sexes, are there only 2 genders? And this is, like I said before, getting into this idea of how are we even defining gender? Like, sure, we can define sex. It's a binary, male, female, easy. There are 2. But are there 2 genders? And this gets into this idea of how are you defining gender in terms of, is it about gender identity and gender expression? Some might make the argument then, oh man. Some might make the argument then that it's more of a spectrum. It's not, gender's not a binary. While others might say, well, it's tied to your sex, and so it still is kind of sort of, a binary. And then others, thinking in terms of this other type of how we understand gender altogether would say, well, gender isn't about, your personal expression. It's more about these rules and expectations that are put on you given whatever society you live in. And so there are two, because if you're a female, there are certain expectations, and if you're a male, there are certain expectations, and that's what gender is in practice. And so they would probably say, well, there are kind of like two genders. But like I said, it's that question itself is already kind of hard to get at, because how are we even defining gender? And I feel like people talk about it. I think we have terms that we might use. We'd say like gender identity or gender expression, to kind of like talk about this one idea of gender. But when we talk about like gendered expectations, we might just say that like gendered expectations or rules, or things like rejection of gender, that these rules aren't mostly negative. And so like it's a completely different, two very different ways of understanding gender. So, and then depending on which one you're using, you might consider gender to be a binary or a spectrum. Like I said, would be a great topic to discuss in class, and we can't really have that. But okay. So the next point, though, so thinking in terms of gender, let's even say we're talking about gender as like a form of expression. Do you think that there are a particular number, or is it really an undefinable like number on the spectrum? Is it like, okay, there aren't two, but maybe there are like five, or you can't even put a number on it? Like, what would you say? I've heard people say, well, it's more of a spectrum, you can't really put a number on it. Some would say, well, maybe it's more like three, because you have maybe like hyper masculine, hyper feminine, and then kind of in between, like androgynous. Like, okay, so like the argument could be made really for whatever you think. I could see like there being like I said, an argument to be made for kind of any of that. My voice isn't going to be able to last much longer. Okay, and this last question. Should gender be something that is appreciated or eliminated? And this gets back to that idea of how we're even defining or understanding gender. Is it in terms of like gender expression? Or is it in terms of these expectations and rules that are imposed on us? And if that's the definition we're talking about, then is it something that should be appreciated or eliminated? Now, this, we're getting into a lot of like feminist theory right now, but this is definitely a great topic for this class, in that when there are these expectations put on you, whether you're a male or a female, every generation we have like a rejection of that to some degree. And it's really interesting. I'm really seeing, I think, in this generation, like an acceptance of those expectations to some degree, which is not my place to say, like whether it's negative or positive, for you as an individual in the world to make your own decisions, of course. But it's just interesting to kind of look at like socioculturally, historically, that we're seeing that. So, often there's just, especially for women, there's often this rejection of, we see this like, generation to generation, a rejection of things like, I don't want to be a stay-at-home wife, I want to have a career, I shouldn't have to be a mother, to be successful or to be an adult, I shouldn't have to wear high heels or makeup. If I want to, then I should be able to wear it sometimes or not other times. Or I shouldn't have to. It shouldn't be an expectation put on me. I am not considered less of a woman because I decide, not to curl my hair, or not to wear high heels, or not to wear dresses. But also, like, you should be able to wear high heels and dresses if you want, But I see, like, I feel like this has been a thing, for generation to generation, this rejection of these rules imposed on us that I'm, especially for women, with like, second wave feminism and women's liberation. And like I said, I feel like I'm starting to kind of see, this is anecdotal, this is just my personal perspective on this. Well, I should say that's not, there are some studies kind of backing this up, but we're starting to see this kind of return to these expectations. Like I said before, when we're talking about this idea of gender as like rules and expectations versus this idea of gender as like personal expression, that it seems as if this idea of understanding gender in terms of like gender identity or gender expression is often seen as adherence to these very like feminine and masculine ideals. And if you're understanding gender in the other way, it's almost like it's like the opposite. Like, no, it's a rejection of those things. Like, we should be rejecting that because those are expectations that none of us really fit. You know, if you're looking at, if you do think like gender is more of like, you know, a binary the way sex is, no one's going to fit that. No one's going to fit into these like hyper masculine and hyper feminine ideas of what society has imposed on us for how we should look, how we should behave, what we should be doing, what we should be thinking. Like, no one's going to be able to adhere to that 100% ever. So none of us really fit into that, but that doesn't stop, you know, society from saying, well, you're a female, so these are the rules, or you're a male, so these are the rules, you know. Okay, anyway, so a lot of food for thought on this. Like I said, you know, participate in that discussion prompt, and we'll get into a little bit more of this kind of idea, but I'll stop the video now. I'm at 45 minutes. And so I'll see you guys on the next one.